Hey, hello BookTube. Today I'm doing a review of Uprooted, a 2015 novel by Naomi Novik. It is a fantasy novel where every 10 years a dragon takes a girl from one of the villages in this valley, which is menaced by a dark, malevolent, evil wood. There's lots of bad creatures. Of course, with the characteristic thing of this novel, the dragon isn't a dragon, but is a magician, a wizard who's called the dragon, and he doesn't take them and eat them because, as the narrator Agnesia says at the beginning of the book, one of the villager girls says, if he actually took and ate a girl every 10 years, everyone would band together and kill him. No, he takes a girl. He's basically the lord of this valley, and he takes a girl as sort of a tribute, as a kind of a tax, and that girl has to serve the dragon for 10 years. Of course, what they find is that by the end of the 10 years, she comes back to her village for a week, a day, something like that, but then ends up leaving and usually going off to the kind of the big city, which is the big center of this country, Apollonia, I think it's called. This is all very much based. It's fantasy, but it's based kind of culturally, heritage-wise, on Polish culture, as I guess you can tell by a name like Agnes. Now I can say Agnesia. So Agnesia is indeed one of these girls that happens to be unluckily at the right age, kind of like, is it 17 to 18 or something like that, like the right age for what the dragon wants, and is going to select for the thing. And she's standing there next to her beautiful, brave, wonderful friend, who basically everyone thinks, oh, it's going to be her. And even that Cassia, even her mother, Cassia's mother, sort of thinks, oh, well, this is going to be the girl. Obviously this is the one. And she sort of detached herself from her in a way. It's one of these things of none of the boys will ask her out in a way, because what's the point in a way, or all that. But of course, this is a fantasy novel, and we've got this other the kind of the plain Jane girl, Agnesia, who's always a kind of a tomboy, always getting kind of muddy, dirty. Also standing beside her, and so of course she's not going to be the one. She's kind of a disagreeable girl in some ways. She seems like she's got very feisty, and it's like, I wonder who's going to get picked. So yes, of course, no, I don't think it's a spoiler thing to say Agnesia ends up with the dragon. And yes, this book goes through a lot of things of like, yes, it's not so we have the dragon isn't the dragon. The beautiful fair maiden isn't the main character, Agnesia, who's this kind of more plain, feisty, feminist, I guess you could say. Not your fair maiden kick-ass thing. She makes mistakes. She's disagreeable. She doesn't get along. She's the hero. And then even later, we have like basically this Prince Merrick shows up at a certain point, and wow, he presents totally as your grand, glorious. He's the hero, and indeed he is very kick-ass. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And indeed, as we go further along with the malevolent, evil woods, that is also becomes more complicated. And it's an interesting book because it's split into sort of a first half that kind of climaxes in the woods, and then there's a second half where it feels like the novel starts over again, which I found a little bit of a hard slog at the beginning, because suddenly we're in the capital, and it sort of has to restart again, and I found that a little bit. I can see why we had to have that, and it's very good for getting kind of ugly duckling, awkward Agnesia, throwing her into this court situation after being kind of she's the country girl, and throwing her into the court is a thing. So it does work, and indeed we go from like a climax at that first half, and then we get to the next climax in the second half. And it's interesting because the climax at the very end in some ways is a direct reply to the first climax. Though to me the part of the book that I think is like might be the best part of the book, and also might be the worst part of the book, is the relationship between Agnesia and the dragon. Because this book gets kind of Uprooted gets kind of classified as a romance, where in the sense, I've been reading a lot of books where I've had kind of very kind of troublesome ideas with male, kind of the ideas of masculinity and how males comport themselves. And this is very much a book where you get to like a feel of like, and here's some kind of gnarly female psychology, because yes, Agnesha goes to work for the dragon, and the dragon is an asshole. He is abusive to her. He calls her every name in the book. He's shitty. He's your shitty, negging asshole older man. And I mean, he's in the Twilight tradition, magicians are very long lived, so he's quite the older man to the 17-year-old girl. And I'm kind of going through this book going, oh God, I hope this is really not going to be one of these. I actively hoped at the beginning, it's like, I hope this isn't setting it up as, oh, he's an asshole at the start of the book, but as we go along, we learn to love him, and then by the end, they live happily ever after. And I'm not going to go into that, because Naomi Novik, I think it's sort of, she wrestles with that, because the dragon fades away kind of towards the end, and Agnesha gets to be her own character. Yet, there's stuff that happens in this book that makes you think, I think it's sort of trying to, point out that the cake is full of bullshit, but also eat the cake and say it tastes, says it tastes wonderful too. To forgive my horrible, not very tasteful, metaphor, simile, or whatever the hell there. Oh God, I'm going to get pilloried on BookTube for not knowing the difference between the two. Leave your comment in the thing below. I'll look it up afterwards. But yeah, it's just like they have this relationship where it's like a young woman gets abused by an older guy, but especially because, and this is like something where like they bond over the magic, and they intertwine, and their magic, and she sort of learns about him. But yeah, this is a guy who's been using women for God knows how long, 10 years at a time, yanking up these young women and using them. And whether those relationships have been romantic or not, he's been using each one of them, literally using them and then discarding them, disrupting their lives. I mean, you could, so it's a very complicated relationship, which I think makes me kind of fall down on that. If this had been a smoother relationship in that it was just straight romance, and it wouldn't have had that gnarly kind of interesting stuff to it. That it isn't just sort of an outright diatribe against this kind of a male as well, and that in some ways Agnesha doesn't change him, but she changes herself. I think you could make a good argument around that the girl that she is at the beginning and the woman she is at the end, she is very much her own woman. So I think you can also make an argument there that when things wrap up in the end, however that wraps up, she wraps up as her own woman. So this was a good book. I'll bridle at the romance, or I'll just say, like, it's a complicated standalone fantasy novel. It's also a complicated standalone romance with when I guess romance doesn't have to mean happy or without problems, without somebody being a complete asshole and a user, but still loving them and still being able to construct a relationship on your own terms from them. I don't know. But so I would have to say, hey, this was my first Naomi Novik, and I really enjoyed it. Oh, I should also say that I listened to it on audio. Julia Emelin was the narrator. She is someone who was born and raised in St. Petersburg, Russia, and so she's reading this with, it's her own Russian, I'm assuming, kind of own Russian accent. I have heard some people say that they had trouble with that bothered them, but for me, it was like sort of this kind of a cool thing, because so many of the kind of high fantasy or fantasy books that would be read in a British accent, because that's the language of fantasy. Oh my lord, oh my lady, and it's like, it's actually kind of good to have something like, fantasy. A Polish knight was a big chivalric thing. Those kind of traditions. So having someone who has that more of the Slavic, I think I'm saying that using that correctly, Slavic accent, and using that in a story, and having like, oh, this is like, yeah, this is happening in Europe, in the continent. Not just not everything just happens on the gets translated and put into England. I actually found as a bonus for this. It gave it an extra little layer of thing there, and it probably pointed out just sort of the culturally Polish stuff that Naomi Novik was using in the novel. So that was an extra bonus for those of us who end up doing these things by audio. That's all I have to say. More videos later. Bye for now.